guys ready?
Yep, yep,
Okay.
it's 6:30. Let's
Okay,
get
so
going.
I'd like to call the San Mateo County Harbor District Board of Commissioners meeting to order. This is our regular meeting on March 20th, 2019 at 6:30.
Do we need to close the previous meeting? I don't
Yes.
think we are.
Do we?
I'd like to just say first that the district is very fortunate to have great staff at both Pillar Point Harbor and at Oyster Point Marina. As a director of operations, I've been privileged to work alongside these men and women. And during my 3 years, had the opportunity to receive and bring forward multiple commendations for their life-saving actions. Today, Mary Lorenas is representing the public in the Pillar Point area and wants to recognize the actions of Pillar Point Harbor Deputy Harbor Masters for their actions at a August 11th, 2018 memorial paddle out for Malcolm Fife, who unfortunately passed away during a surfing accident. So, Mary, would you like to stand up? Mary's got a plaque we'd like to present to Pillar Point Harbor. Deputy Harbor Masters.
I got something to say first.
Yeah. We've got Willie, who is the Assistant Harbor Master, Michael Williams, on behalf of the Deputy Harbor Masters, and Bobby, who's the Deputy Harbor Master at Pillar Point Harbor.
Okay. So first of all, I'm Mary Lorenas. I'd like to apologize for this taking so long to get here, but on August 11, 2018, there was a memorial paddle out for coastside surfer Malcolm Fikes. Malcolm died on July 22nd while surfing with friends at Pomponio State Beach. My husband Ed and I knew Malcolm since he was born. We were good friends with the Fikes family and watched as both of their sons grew into accomplished young men. One of my favorite Malcolm stories is when he was told that he could not go to a party, so he stuffed his blankets with pillows to make it look like he was in bed sleeping, snuck out of the house, and rode his bike to the party. His mother figured out what her son had done, and with Malcolm's little brother in tow, went to the party and retrieved Malcolm at the party, much to Malcolm's embarrassment. It was a long time before Malcolm's friends let him forget that he was busted by his mom and his little brother. Although he was only 20 years old, Malcolm was a community leader who was beloved not only throughout the surf community, but as a member of the Coast Side. He was a promising student, athlete, and active in water rescue and safety. Malcolm was known for saying, "Show up and be kind." During the memorial paddle out, over 200 people gathered on Miramar Beach and watched as individuals from the surfing community paddled out on their surfboards and made the traditional circle to perform a memorial ceremony. Standing by was the Radden and Pillar Point Harbor Patrol. When the time came to splash the water, releasing the prayers from Malcolm, the Radden responded with its water cannon, honoring this young man's life who was lost to the sea. This act was met with cheers and laughter by the community. It was a very thoughtful gesture. On this day, members of the Pillar Point Harbor went out of their way to participate in the ceremony that not only honored the young life of this young man, but showed true compassion and community spirit. Their presence offered safety for the paddlers, many of whom were overwhelmed with emotion. So to say thank you to the Harbor Patrol and to honor their community spirit, I would like to present to Pillar Point Harbor Patrol this plaque of appreciation for their services to the coastside community of San Mateo County. And the plaque reads, "Show up and be kind," presented to Pillar Point Harbor Patrol in appreciation for your devoted service to the coastside community.
Mary, turn around and let's just get some pictures here.
maybe
They want to.
We'll get in the middle of these two handsome guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, no.
Wait,
Finding X.
Oh, it made me cry, that's okay.
Kind of dyslexic, so I always switch back.
It looks so goofy, I gotta tell you. It's so cute.
I think it's worth noting that a lot of what happened that day was due in part to the efforts of Malcolm's friends, the State
Yeah.
Parks lifeguards, and Cal Fire also
Yeah,
participated.
yeah. They had
So
their
it wasn't just
lights
us.
blinking.
Yeah.
You guys were there.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
thank you, Mary, and thank you to our dedicated harbor patrol. That was really nice and appreciated. So next we have an opportunity for public comment. I don't have any,
Commissioner comments.
we're not there yet. So I don't have any, public comment slips. So I'm gonna move on unless there's someone here that has something they wanna say. Doesn't look like it, okay. So next, we're to commissioner comments, and, I think Ed's raring to go, so maybe we can start with him.
Well, I want to thank the guys, because it meant a lot. I paddled out, and there were a lot of older folks out there that looked like they were gonna have a heart attack, so it was good to have you guys there. So I'm gonna quickly wrap up my, or go over the month on some of the things I've done over the last month. So February 25, I gave a presentation on surf riders' work on water quality at Capistrano Beach. That's over by the brew pub. I gave the presentation to the the Half Moon Bay Yacht Club. And the thing is that Surf Rider does the water quality work with the RCD, the Resource Conservation District, which is partially funded by the Harbor District, and we've been working on this project together for a number of years. Then on March 19th, I attended the Oceans Day in Sacramento. Ocean and coastal advocates from all over the state come together on March 19th to meet with folks from the state Senate and Assembly, and the idea is to inspire them to work towards protecting California oceans and coastline. So the highlights for the topics were protection of marine protected areas, protection of ocean and coast from pollution, including plastics, defending our ocean and coast from offshore oil drilling. And of note is the federal government is again going after our coastal waters. So this gives us another chance to write a letter in support of protecting our coast from the perils of oil drilling. You'll be hearing more about that later. San Mateo County was well represented. Michelle Cleve from Sea Huggers was there, and we're collaborating with them on a CBIN project with the harbor. There were several folks from the San Mateo County chapter of Surf Rider. And of note, the state controller and also the state lands commissioner, vice chair, Betty Yee, spoke about the state's commitment to environmental protection and equal access to our beaches and oceans. And she specifically highlighted the achievements of Harbor District Board President Sabrina Brennan in leading the way towards equal access and pay for women surfing. And the governor was there too, so he got to hear that. So Pillar Point was in the news again. And I'm thrilled to be asked to attend an invitation-only event on the state of the science and practice of designing and implementing living shorelines and adaptation. And this is an opportunity for me to hear from experts on shoreline protection, but also to talk about some of the things that we're doing here. The workshop will take place in April 2nd, and it's hosted by several state and local agencies, including NOAA. So I'll be reporting on this at our Climate Change Committee meeting in April. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to go next? I can't see, sorry. Oh, Nancy, go ahead.
So on February 27th, I attended a Committee for Green Foothills talk in Redwood City on the Cargill proposal to develop the 1,400-acre Redwood City salt flats. Again, it's reared its head. And Committee for Green Foothills did a really great presentation on that project in particular and why we should be against it, but they also did a talk on shoreline protection. So it was very interesting for me to learn about. And last night I attended the CSDA meeting in Burlingame and was elected vice president, and I'm really excited to be a part of this group. I love the work that they do.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It was the
Oops,
easiest
that's
campaign ever. A single night. And Rick Lohman wanted me to pass along his thanks to our board for his support as the LAFCO rep.
Nice.
That's it.
Okay. Virginia, do you have anything?
No, I don't have
Okay.
anything.
Tom?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention, we're gonna get a lot busier in the harbor. Recreational rockfish opens April 1st. Recreational salmon below Pigeon Point opens April 6th. Recreational salmon opens outside of our harbor April 13th. And the forecast is very good for salmon this year, so we're gonna keep our fingers crossed and see if we can't enjoy some of nature's bounty.
Okay, thank you. So I've got three things really. The first is I had a chance to open my California Special District Association magazine before the meeting started, and I flipped to page 40, which is an article titled, "Are You Missing a Policy for Taking Positions on State Legislation?" And it directs special district members to a sample policy on the CSDA website that we can download if we're interested. And it talks about the fact that special districts have the authority to lobby state legislature, other agencies, and individual decision makers on legislation and other matters of interest to the district, and to share our position with legislators directly through letters of support or opposition. So just wanted to let the board know about that. And while we're on the topic, I'll mention Assembly Bill 467, which is proposed legislation that would require pay parity for athletic events held on state lands. It's a new bill and it's making its way slowly. It's going to be in committee for a hearing on April 9th, I believe it is. I'm planning to be there for that. And it's an opportunity to codify the work of the Committee for Equity in Women's Surfing and getting requirements through the help of the State Lands Commission for pay parity, equal prize money for the Maverick Surf competition. So this would, if this bill passes, it would mean that any athletic competition on any state land in California would, that has gendered categories, would have to provide for equal prize money. So I'm pretty excited about that and learning more about it. And then I also wanted to mention that last week I had an opportunity to attend the Equality California LGBTQ Leadership Summit, which was held in Sacramento. And we were fortunate to have President Pro Tem of the California Senate, Toni Atkins, attend the summit, and she also hosted kind of the greeting the evening before the summit started. And we also had Senator Scott Wiener there as chair of the LGBTQ caucus. So he was there speaking. And also another local assemblyman, Kevin Lowe, who's also the ex officio chair of the LGBTQ caucus. So it was a great event. Evan, yeah. Who did I say?
You said Kevin. I'm
Oh,
like, is there someone
Evan.
I don't know?
No, Evan Lowe. And then there were many other people there. It was well attended. There was probably about 200 people total, and it was, I learned a lot. So anyway, that's my report. So next, we are going to go to consent. Does anybody have anything they would like to pull off consent?
I do. I'd like to pull off item 5.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
All right, so would someone like to make a motion to approve items 1 through 4 and 6?
So maybe I'll second.
Okay. Should we have a roll call?
Commissioner Chancarelli,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrie,
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz,
Aye.
Commissioner Mathush,
Aye.
President Brennan.
Aye. Okay, and so then we'll come back to 5 at the end of the meeting, so if something, John, maybe you can help me remember.
Whichever you prefer.
Okay. And then next we have for discussion, I think we should go ahead and do this because I think this is what people want to hear about. Pillar Point Harbor H-Dock Replacement Project Update and Proposal to combine this project with the adjacent Johnson Pier Terminus Reconfiguration Project. And we have a presentation, which is coming from Anita.
Okay, actually, Martha and Nicholas here to do the presentation, but I just want to give you a background on this project. This item has to do with the Pillar Point Harbor's H-Dock replacement project and a proposal to combine this project with the Johnson Pier Terminus reconfiguration project, as you just mentioned. The existing H-Dock is 32 years old and provides approximately 50 slips for commercial fishing and recreation vessels and is a vital component of Pillar Point Harbor. H-Dock was assessed in 2014 and it was determined to have exceeded its service life and needed replacing. It was also noted that none of the existing docks provided ADA accessible gangways. The board has previously approved a work directive with the firm of Moffitt and Nichol to begin the H-Dock replacement project. Moffitt and Nichol was chosen through a public RFP process, and based on the responses to the RFP, it was selected to be a bench design engineering consultant for the district. Moffitt and Nichol has facilitated 2 public meetings to gather input into the dock replacement design and is in the process of finalizing the design renderings. This board has also approved the reconfiguration of the Johnson Pier Terminus project previously. Johnson Pier was originally designed to accommodate small trucks. However, since the early 1960s, large semi-trailer trucks have been using this pier. It's difficult for these large trucks to use this pier efficiently because of the pier's design and size. This problem becomes a major issue during busy fishing seasons because these trucks have to back onto the pier and load one at a time. The 3 fish buyers that operate their businesses on this pier and have leases with the Harbor District have an additional challenge during this time because there just isn't enough work room on the pier. This has prevented the installation of equitable additional hoists. District staff has facilitated 2 public meetings to gather input from stakeholders on the needs and ideas for equitable design changes for this pier. Based on the input from these 2 public meetings, we have included a reconfiguration design on page 7-4 in your staff report, which we believe would be a good starting point. We also believe that combining the 2 projects, the H-Dock replacement project and the Johnson Pier reconfiguration projects, makes sense at this time for 2 reasons. 1, permitting agencies, as you know, prefer to do programmatic permitting. And 2, it would simply be more cost effective to combine the projects. As to the impacts on the budget, there is no impact at this time. The current budget includes $2.2 million for the Johnson Pier repairs and for Johnson Pier docks. So what we've done is we've asked Moffitt and Nichol to prepare a proposal for combining the 2 projects. This proposal is also included with the staff report as Exhibit A. And as I mentioned before, representatives from Moffett and Nichol are here to have they have prepared presentation to provide more details as well as answer any questions related to their proposal. And the recommended motion after they give you your presentation would be to receive this update on the HVAC replacement project and authorize the interim general manager to execute a work directive amendment with Moffett and Nichol for an amount not to exceed $1,318,000 to combine this project with the Johnson Pier reconfiguration project for design, engineering, permitting, and construction management for both adjacent projects. Thank you. I'm sorry. This is Brad Porter and Neil.
I'm Brad.
You're Brad and Neil
Yeah.
Nichols, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll start.
Okay. You can actually just click it from there.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you,
All right.
you turn that on, and then it can.
All right. Excuse me, I'm gonna sit because I can't put weight on my right foot, so. Neil Nichols, I'm the project manager for the Dock H replacement project, which is, as you heard, is underway. I'm gonna give you a quick status. We started in 2017, just submitted 95% a few days ago. We're working through that, and we're doing the board presentation right there, three from the bottom today. And we'll be talking later on about the combination of Johnson Pier. I want to just give a quick recap of where we are on the Dock H replacement as a standalone. And we'll do 100% at some point pretty soon. So here's a quick layout overview. Got the arrow in the background there. You can see that we're extending the pier, the dock out about 200 feet. And we benefit from that. And you guys have seen this several times before, so I'll try to get through it pretty quickly. But we're adding about 17 additional berths, some bigger berths. So we're gaining 9, the changes there are a little bit off. But we got 9 more 50-footers, 5 more 55-footers, and 3 more 65-footers. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna postpone it. We got that gangway coming down off of Johnson Pier is gonna be an ADA accessible 80-foot gangway.
And the berths are wider as well, to accommodate the wider, more modern fishing vessels.
Correct. Some of the things that came up in the previous public meetings were pedestal location, hose bib location, kind of things that were more user friendly. So we're basically gonna keep it very similar to what we have out there right now. Piles are gonna be located in the knees, and the opposite knee will have the pedestals and the hose bibs, and that's pretty much the input we got from the public. We're gonna use those lighthouse model pedestals. They will not have hose bibs like that one is showing. Our hose bibs will come out of the deck the way they have them right now. So they'll just be sticking up with a double hose bib coming out the deck. Another thing that came up, I think at the last public meeting, was to put rounded finger ends, just to be a little bit easier to get in and out, so that we can accommodate that. Well, that was fast. Okay. Yeah, the other thing that, talking with John over the details is just improving just the accessibility of the site. You know, we're trying to avoid having hoses and electrical cords crossing the fingers and things like that. So we're gonna try to, the 2 concrete float manufacturers that we've talked to, both I think can put a little chase there so you can get your garden hose and your electrical extension cord hidden so you got a nice walking surface. So those are the things that the public wanted. That's what we're accommodating right now. It's, we're at 95% design, and now we're kind of at this critical, juncture of the next step. So I'm going to hand it off to Brad to take the Johnson Pier portion, how it kind of ties in.
Thanks, Neil. I'm Brad Porter with Moffett. I'm the project principal on the work we've been doing for San Mateo County Harbor District over the last 4 or 5 years since we've had the contract. One thing that Neil, does one of these go back? Yeah, there we go. When we first started the project, it was just gonna pretty much be a replacement in kind of the existing docks. But as you can see here, we're adding a couple 100 feet. So that from a permitting standpoint, what was originally going to be a fairly simple, like what we call a nationwide permit, and a categorical exemption for CEQA, because we're expanding the area of the docks, where CEQA would likely require a initial study of mitigated neg deck and an individual permit. So the permitting will be more complex. So part of what Neil was talking about is this kind of being a juncture, but so for just the H-Dock project by itself, the way after the public review and the various presentations and the development of the design, from a permitting standpoint, the project has gotten a little bit more complex. So that's one thought. Back in 2014, we first assisted the Harbor District. They were pursuing some grant money to improve the access out to Johnson Pier, starting at, the pointer is, oh, did I turn it off?
I think it's
Green button. Oh, okay, there we go. So in 2014, to get better truck access out into Johnson Pier, starting here at Highway 1, there were some conflicts where like semis will run over the curbs and stuff. We were gonna redo some road improvements, but then have it so that they could pull in out here head first, and then, you know, come to the drawings later, but so they could turn around out here, maneuver, and then drive straight out. And to do that, kind of, here's what was the major project elements, is we were gonna remove the timber part, that lower part here on the north side of Johnson Pier, and then expand it to the south here. So we're calling this part here the infill, for the wooden docks are, and then this is the extension to the south. Well, to extend it to the south, you would need to relocate the fuel dock, because it would hit that. So we'll replace the fuel dock, and of course we would have to do it with permits and so forth. And this would be because we would be expanding it. Here we go. So here we are just looking in plan view. Here's that infill portion that I was talking about. And then this expansion to the south. From a permitting standpoint, you could, this is kind of replacement in kind, you're covering some water area here, but you're certainly covering more water area here. So this would be similar to H-Dock, would be a mitigated neg deck for your CEQA compliance, and it would certainly be an individual permit for the regulatory, for the Corps and Water Board. And you would be straightening out the fuel dock. And so I think, did we say the truck maneuvering here? Yeah, so the idea is that trucks could pull in here, so like they pull in, this is like the maximum California street legal semis, 45-foot trailer with 65 feet overall. So we ran some turning templates. In fact, this was Neil who ran the templates, and we came up with this too. So they could pull in here, head first, and then they can back in here. They could back into the fish buyers if they wanted to load there, or they could load here. But in any event, they would have enough space then to pull in head first, back up, and then go out head first. And that would, I think, greatly improve just the activities out there with people parking and public walking. So that was what we had done before, 2014, 2016, and then talking with John, it sounds like this may be the time that the district may want to move forward with doing the project. So we were asked to prepare a proposal of what it might take to do the engineering for that. And because as part of a larger, it sort of made sense to combine them as part of the capital improvement process, to where if we made it one project, the permitting, you could make it all one permit. And I think there would be overall, rather than doing two permits, it would be individual permits, but just putting them into one project along with perhaps the entire marina, it would go as one permit, and it would take less time than doing two separate permits. And then also during construction, if it was done as one construction contract, one of the big costs is a barge mounted crane.
What was that? I couldn't hear what the last part.
One of the biggest costs with marine construction for the pile driving is the mobilization cost for what we call a barge mounted crane, a big crane that sits on a floating, like for the Romeo Pier demo, that's one of the big costs. And for this, they would certainly drive probably large concrete pile, as they will for the HDOC project here. And just to bring that pile driver to the site is probably $100,000 up. So that if you did them together, you would reduce your overall mobilization costs as if they were done separately. And then there's just kind of the economy of scale of doing them together. So so we were asked to look at that, to prepare a proposal to what it would take to combine the two projects. So that's what we did. Now, I should say with the Johnson Pier, because you're adding on to it, and exactly how we would go about this, I mean, this is very diagrammatic, obviously, but we would hone in on the size of these. One of the other things that we do a lot of pier type work. We've been in business for 7 years. We got started at the Port of Long Beach. We do a lot of piers. We did the replacement, similar up here to Johnson Pier up in Trinidad, California. I did that concrete pier. We did that 5 years ago, which means it's probably been 10 because I think it was 5. But no, I think it was like 5, 6 years ago. We've done we've done a number along San Francisco waterfront, the retrofit of Pier 1, the Exploratorium Pier 15. We're doing the Valero Pier up in Benicia, and I could go on and on and on. But based on our experiences, the pier of this age, once we're adding on to it with this amount of new deck space, it would have to meet, these would certainly have to meet current seismic code, which is more stringent than when, I mean, this is informed by more recent earthquakes, certainly Loma Prieta, but also the one in Japan and the Northridge earthquake in the south. So the seismic code that these would have to be designed to is, Johnson Pier itself would almost assuredly not meet the current seismic code. And if you're adding on this amount to it, you might have to retrofit the whole pier, which would be fairly costly to do. But you can do things like what's called a seismic joint you put across. This is commonly done at you see these, these metal plates. They're there at the ferry building in San Francisco and all over, where you separate the two structures by a foot or two, so that in the earthquake, when one of them wants to sway like this, and the other one wants to sway like that, they don't pound against each other. So you separate them and then you put that walking joint over them. It's likely we would need to do something here rather than retrofit the whole pier to a seismic joint. But this is all to say that to really give an accurate idea of what it would take to do it from a design standpoint, we would recommend first just doing kind of a concept study to help get some of the background info, go out and do the geotech investigation and a dive survey to see what condition your existing piles are in. And there's a lot of front-end work that would be needed to do a good concept design to really more specifically design what it is that the project is about.
So can I
So-
ask a question about the retrofitting thing? So is that, because obviously this is not the only pier in California that's had to deal with this issue, and a lot of them are pretty old. What have, besides the ferry building, what are other piers that are in similar size to ours, what are they doing? Are they, I mean, it seems like it'd be so expensive, as you said. So are they doing the thing that you had just mentioned in terms of partial fix, if you will?
You mean where there's a space left
Yeah.
between the new structure
the
and the
one that's
old?
not as costly.
Yeah, well, that's, okay. Currently, we're doing seismic retrofit, we're doing work for the National Park Service for the wharf out at Alcatraz. That was built in 1935.
Okay.
We're doing that. Okay, I'll just run around the bay of projects that I know about. Pier 1 in San Francisco, we did that. Basically, what you do is you stiffen the whole thing up to limit
Yeah, sway.
the sway.
Yeah.
For the more, I'll say, occupied piers, like Pier 1, that's where the Port of San Francisco moved with their office space, so it's a very occupied building. There they stiffen up, they did a seismic retrofit. The cost of that in 1999, that's one of the first projects I did with Moffitt, it was about $10 million in money.
And that's not present value, okay?
No, exploratory, we just did Pier 15. There they retrofit the whole building, but that's a museum,
Yes.
public space.
But for
It's-
our comparable size, like,
Okay.
even up and down, I mean, you don't have to go through all the specifics,
Yeah.
I just wanna get a range, a cost range.
Well, Okay, if you're gonna do a full retrofit, if you had to retrofit Johnson Pier, just the cost to do the retrofit, I'm gonna guess would be in the neighborhood of $10 million. Just to do the retrofit, that's not gaining any more square footage.
Right,
So I would
in
think
the
this,
current, for the current structure.
for the current structure,
Yeah.
you go in there and stiffen it up to where it met it, I'm just throwing out a number of
Yeah.
10 million. We're doing a project right now, well, okay, but it's also, that's a housing development, they wanna put housing on it to an old commercial wharf in Alameda. Okay, Trinidad Pier, but that was a total replacement, that was like $7 million, $8 million, but that was a total replacement. And actually, it's not that different than Johnson Pier, or take off the L, but Trinidad Pier, if you were to take this out, but just the tangent part here is about like what Trinidad Pier is. Similar length, similar width. That was about 7 million, that was 4 years ago. But, okay, but I'm trying to think of a retrofit to an existing similar pier in a commercial use.
I mean, you can come back to it, I just wanted to
Yeah.
throw out the question.
Yeah. I think our strategy on this would be to do the seismic joint,
Yeah,
so that you
that's-
don't have to do anything to the existing pier.
Okay.
But these new ones would have, the
The-
infill here
the
would have to
joints,
get
yeah.
done to the current code.
Code.
Yeah.
But you're kind of building in a green field there, that is,
Yeah.
you're not having to tie into existing stuff, so that, and these here, we're probably using something on the order of $500 to $600 a square foot for a new concrete, a similar structure to what Johnson Pier was originally, but built into today's code, a concrete pier. So we kind of, maybe I should just jump to this. So we kind of, for the various project elements, if we were to combine the projects, this is kind of our quick order of magnitude cost. So we've got, so for the Johnson Pier expansion, what I was just showing, so demolishing the infill part, doing the south extension, doing the infill of the timber part, okay, and seismic joint,
Joints, yeah.
using that approach, and utilities, we're coming up with, let's just say 7 million to 8.5, $9 million. Fuel dock is gonna have to get relocated, extended, replaced, let's just say $500,000 to $1 million. And then the H dock part, like Neil was saying, that's, we've got a more detailed estimate as part of that project, but the total of that is something in the neighborhood of $4 million. So the combined, if you were to combine the Johnson Pier expansion, fuel dock, and H dock, it's $12 to $14 million. Okay, so that's cost. So like I was saying, that to make these determinations, like what do we need to do? Do we need to do a seismic joint? Do we need a retrofit? We would recommend, like in phase 1, we would make that determination. We would do enough studies, the geotechnical survey, and enough analysis to kind of better answer that question of what do we need to do for the structural configuration. Then once we determined that, we would go through kind of the normal design process. We would do a preliminary design to add some more detail, present it to you all for approval, and get public input and stakeholder input, kind of in this preliminary design phase. Then once that was nailed down, then we would begin the permitting process at about 20–30% design.
So I have a question for you. In after you do the assessment, what's the criteria by which you determine what we need to do?
Good question. We would come out with the thing, well, we would look at the criteria. One is, from a structural standpoint, I don't know if this is ASC 61-14 is the one that we would use rather than the California Building Code. It's something that is specific for marine structures, and we think it's more applicable and gives a more efficient design than if you were to have to use the California Building Code. So that would be part of it, is we would establish what by code we feel is appropriate for that. And certainly it would be getting your input as far as like the layout of it and the space requirements. And once we kind of get the features that you would want, we would define what the regulatory, we would analyze it and come up with like how much it's swaying and how much separation you would need. And we would do a more detailed layout and show you what it would look like, and we would kind of get your input and buy off on that, and we would come up with an established design criteria, what code we're going to use, a more refined cost estimate. Is that?
That's
Am I
kind of
answering your
it, but
question?
also will you give us enough information for us to do a cost benefit analysis versus longevity of whatever you decide needs to be done relative to complete replacement?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and one of the things we would do is we would come in and we would look at so-called life cycle analyses. We would look at various, I mean, I would think you would go with concrete, but we would look at like what kind of material we would go with. There are fiberglass piles now, there's steel, there's some advantages, disadvantages, so forth. And we would present that as far as you're gonna get 30 years of life or 40 years of life for this cost, and what kind of functionality you might get, or maybe coming back to this and saying, well, a couple of alternatives, if you did this, but you didn't do this, what would that look like as far as the operations, what would the cost differences be? We would develop scenarios like that for both functionality and lifetime, and what, yeah, so for $30 million you get this, or $7 million you get this life, for $9 million it would be 50 years of life. Yes, we would give you, I think, what you would need to do your kind of capital planning.
Okay.
Yeah, that would definitely be part of the concept design.
Because it seems to me that once you get a diver down there and you do the assessment, it won't necessarily be a either or answer. There'll be some latitude in what you guys decide could be done to meet specs relative to how long each piece will last.
Yeah. I mean, here's kind of, in this first phase, this is in our proposal, this was kind of our detailed breakdown of the tasks that we would be doing during this phase one, and kind of this outreach with stakeholders, but this design basis development, that would be, is where we would be developing a lot of that stuff with you. Structural analysis, and then kind of coming up with environmental and permit issues, constraints. So if we do this, if we do that, you know, steel piles, concrete piles, what's that gonna do for the time, the permitting timeline, and you know, more refined cost estimates that would give you some of these life cycle costs. And then we would finally come up with this concept design report. So after we've looked at all these things and studied it, that we would come up with a report for your approval. Let's see here, so that's project costs.
Can I ask you a question about that slide that you just closed? The anticipated construction cost. So the total, what other numbers are included in that total? If you look at the subtotals of Johnson Pier expansion, fuel dock and H dock, in neither the low nor the high range do the totals add up. So you have subtotals. Subtotal for Johnson Pier expansion, for example, 8,600,000. Subtotal for fuel dock, 900,000, and then H dock, 4,200,000. Those numbers do not add up to 14,050,000. They add up to 13,700.
I may have made a math error. No, the intent was to add 8.6, 900, and 4.2, and that should add up to 14. But let's just do a dumb check. If you added 9 and 4, you get 13. If you add another million, you get 14.
And the low range is off as well.
This is off?
The low
No, the
range and
11.
the high
The
range.
11?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so if you had 7 and 4, you get 11, and 6 is, I mean, did you add these up?
Yeah,
Okay, what should this be?
11.3.
11.3, okay, I must have made a math error. 9 and 6 is 5, and yeah, you're right, it would be 3. We made a math error.
Okay.
So this should be 11.3, you said?
Yes.
And then what should this one be?
13.7.
13.7, okay. So, okay.
Okay.
So somewhere in the spreadsheet, we must have made a math error. Or probably actually what I did is I probably did it in a spreadsheet and then put it in the proposal, I filled it in. I don't know what I did. Somewhere there's a-
That's probably
Could-
That's before I stepped on your foot, when you.
the fuel dock numbers we changed at the end, and I think the totals came out.
Could we go back, I'm sorry, are you done with that slide, Nancy? Did you have anything else?
That's it?
Okay. Could we go back to the drawing of the, yeah, there we go.
Okay.
So, I had a couple questions. I was wondering, since you guys have a lot of experience working in different locations, are there, like, if we were going to, I know we're not planning to do this, but if we were gonna start fresh and build like a whole new pier, what would be done differently today, like with regard to environmental protections, like drainage and stuff like that, than back in the day when this pier was constructed?
Well, one of the things, one of the things that would be done differently is today, and we'll probably have to address it on this one, is that your storm water cannot just run off into the bay.
That's what I thought.
Which it does right now. Like
Yeah.
when we did Trinidad, we had to collect all of it and run it back to the shore. Now, whether we would have to do that here or not, I wouldn't be surprised if we did. And so we'll have to somehow we'll have to do sump pumps, which is a pretty high volume, or somehow run a gravity line, collect it all and run it back. How we would do it out on, I can't recall right offhand, but are there scuppers in the bull rail?
No.
Okay, so you think they have drains and, does anyone know if do they just, are there drains that go right in the bay?
Oh, at present? Yeah,
Yeah.
they just go in the bay.
Yeah.
Straight to the harbor.
Right.
Yeah.
And where would it drain to if you piped it out?
You would have to run back to your municipal storm drain system, and I'm presuming, well, I don't know.
So that wouldn't solve the problem, because our municipal storm drain system just dumps it back into the harbor.
There's no filtration that has been put as part of C3?
Which is why we have a terrible water quality problem in our harbor, because we don't have any proper stormwater
Filtration.
outfall filtration.
Well, we would have to use, I would anticipate we would have to do something, either carbon filters or some kind of filtration done before we did that. I mean, that would be part of what the regional board would require, I would anticipate, as part of the permits.
Yeah, we had talked about, actually, when we were applying for the grants originally, and Alpha Nickel were helping us, we were talking about a perimeter, capture drain, if you will, and then the filtration system similar to the drain that we've got at the launch ramp. So that the water would filter prior to going back into the harbor. However, I think like Brad's saying, it would, we'll be required to do something. I think we would choose to do above and beyond whatever is required.
And so that would be in the event that we did this partial replacement or additions versus, either way, if we did like a new pier or we did renovations to the existing pier, we're gonna have to address the drainage either way, is what I'm hearing.
I would think, yes, I
Okay.
would anticipate that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then my next question is, not that I wanna add any more costs to this, but I've always wondered if there was a way that we could add more space around the sides of the building, because it's really tight and you can't really run a forklift around all sides of the building there.
Okay.
I don't
So
know.
expand your apron around here?
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody had asked about that yet.
We've currently, let me just jump in, Sabrina, just to say that we've currently had just 2 meetings
Oh,
with
okay.
stakeholders, but that was not brought up.
I
But
may be the only one that
the
thinks.
the relocation of hoists, and I think a relatively amicable, equitable discussion was arrived, and a feasible plan was arrived at. That'll be a starting point.
Uh-huh.
But something like what you're suggesting, I would think would be a good addition as well, that wouldn't be dramatically more costs involved, should the users, should stakeholders, think it worthwhile.
It could certainly be done, I'm just thinking, you drive a pilot, do like a kind of a glorified catwalk around it, metal grate, or, you can do concrete. If you went with concrete and you tied it in here, you're probably gonna pay a pretty good premium just for that little skinny
Mm-hmm.
section you're doing around there.
But what if we, like, see how you're filling in that whole area where, what do we call that, the boat graveyard area?
Okay.
If that
Timber platform.
section,
Yeah.
if that section was like a little bit wider, then at least we could have a little bit of extra deck on one side of the building. I don't know that that would be helpful, but you know what I mean? You could bring it all the way out to the end of the pier.
Like,
Yeah,
do you like that?
yeah, something
Yeah.
like, something like.
Absolutely, yeah, and again, that's part of, I mean, that is typical of what we do in that first phase, because we start drawing on, you know, literally sketches on paper, and what about this, what about that, and
Okay,
and kind of brainstorming it, and before we get, but absolutely, yeah, that would all get out there, and what would that cost? I mean, just, I'd thrown out the number here, we're using some $500 to $600 a square foot. For doing something that's kind of a little more intricate like that, you know, that's probably more like in $1,000 to $1,200 a square foot, just for planning purposes.
mhm,
But yeah, we would look at all kinds of options of getting more space and, yeah, and then, or when you start talking about those numbers, this is a wood frame building? This building, I think it's a wood frame building,
mhm.
Yeah.
okay? I mean, one option might be, it might be more cost effective, to just demo the building and build a new one. That's a little bit further this way. Just
Yeah.
a thought.
Well, the building is no gem really, but, yeah, I mean, if we're gonna look at stuff, let's put everything on the
Yeah.
table.
Yeah, so that, I mean, maybe doing this is another million, but demoing the building and moving it 20 feet that way is 600,000, and you get a brand new building.
Mhm.
We're currently going through, we're working for the city of Capitol, we're doing a very similar, project for them for their wharf renovation, and we're going through this exact same process.
Mhm.
Do we do new buildings or not, or utilities above deck and wider here, what about?
And is
Yeah.
that cost comparable to this?
Actually, it is, yes,
Okay.
yeah,
That was the reason for my questions before, just trying to get an idea of what the comps are.
their costs are quite similar. Theirs is, they passed a $10 million bond measure
Okay.
this, 2 years ago that we were assisting them with. And they're now, of course, that's strictly pedestrian wharf.
Okay.
It's only,
It's not like a working wharf like this?
not commercial fishing. They do launch boats, there's a boat hoist there, and there's boat launches, but it's largely, well, it's entirely recreational. So it's
Okay.
sport fishing, boating, there's a restaurant and a boat shop, and it's largely public.
Yeah, I haven't been there in years.
It's a charming,
Yeah,
it's one of
it's
the
so
charming
charming.
views. I mean, it's similar to Johnson as far as the, if you took off the commercial part, but it goes up, it has a restaurant at the end, and,
Yeah.
it's a charming pier, go there. But yeah, theirs is in the order of $6 to $7 million of what they want to do. Let's see. So, yeah, I was kind of going through the phasing, so we would, kind of redo permitting and then, final design, and these are kind of the way that we broke out our proposal, just based upon what we would anticipate are the levels of effort that would be required for the engineering and assistance with the process of getting it built.
And we wouldn't, our fish buyers would not need to use generators anymore, correct? We would take care of that situation.
They're using generators now?
They are,
Okay.
for like when we're doing,
In peak-
squid pumping
In
and
peak
so
demand
forth.
times, but
Okay.
yeah, you're, in your proposal, or in Moffett Nichols' proposal, design engineering proposal, there is upgrade to the electric.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, because I know that, well, I know a while ago that you've got, I think, what is it, I can't remember, but it's like you've got 480 or something coming out to about here, there's that box there. But it doesn't extend all the way out to Johnson, and we were looking at some different schemes. I think we figured out that the transformer had capacity, but that the panel board, you'd have to run new conductors from here out to here, and at 480, they were pretty big conductors and fairly costly. So I think it's certainly doing an upgrade. I know that we had, at a very conceptual level, looked at that before, and that could certainly be part of this project, so they all had, I think 483 phase is what they want, so they can run the higher load, Yeah, no, that would certainly be, this would be the time to do it.
Great. Any other questions?
Let me just say again, Brad, go to the one that had the proposed location for the hoists and all.
Yeah.
Yeah, right there. Again, this is just based on my meeting with, me and the former general manager, Steve McGraw's meeting with the fish buyers and a few other stakeholders. And trying to kind of just get a basic idea of what they wanted. But of course, part of Moffett and Nichols' proposal now is to do a much more in-depth discussion, which could obviously dramatically change this. But this is, the way it's set up now, seems to meet everyone's needs and seems to be equitable, and where everybody would have enough space for us to relocate the freezers and have adequate tote storage, and have all fish buyers be able to have ample room to pull boats up, and each have 2 hoists as well. So the being equitable amongst all 3 fish buyers is obviously very important to the board, I know. And
Yeah.
that's, we'd get much more input from all 3 fish buyers and other stakeholders.
So I think we looked at it, but how soon could we get this process moving?
Okay. With the design engineering for the actual reconfiguration of the pier, once we work through all the process with meeting with stakeholders, permitting and everything, we then have to put the actual project to bid for construction. And then we have to also, of course, determine what time of year would be best for the fish buyers as well. What would you say, Brad, would be a rough estimate for all that? And let me just say that we're gonna be discussing in a few minutes a stopgap measure that Moffett Nickel is gonna also be proposing, where immediately we wish to move forward with reinforcing pilings underneath the timber platform, all of which will unfortunately later be removed and demoed. But because of the poor condition of the pilings and the length of time that it's gonna take for this larger reconfiguration project, we think it necessary. What would you say, rough ballpark, Neil, Brad, to be able to get design engineering, permitting, and get it to bid?
You know, well, I think, okay, some of them would run concurrent, like the way we have here, typically we take it to a 30% design, then we go to permitting. And permitting is oftentimes it's the one that's delayed, because with these, it's not gonna be a nationwide, it's gonna be an individual permit, and it's gonna be full CEQA, so. CEQA and permitting, I would say, is probably 1.5 years at least. But the design would run concurrent with that, so that realistically, I would say it's probably 2 years to go to bid, and then the construction of it is, I'm gonna say, 6 months?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
6 months.
We're doing construction, once we get it to a contractor, they'll, and we pick a time we want it done, they'll mobilize and get out of here as quickly as possible, just like they did with Romeo Pier.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'd say, yeah, 3 years, 3 years to completion would be my estimate at this point.
Okay, great. All
So I
right.
have a question, and actually it's geared more towards me, I can't really see the budget numbers, but, well, first of all, thanks for the presentation, it was very helpful, and this was helpful, I just wanted to understand comps, but, so for our funds, we have.
2.2.
So we have to, yeah, but we're gonna have to sock away reserves
For
for
future years,
this,
for future.
absolutely, for the different phases. I'm just trying to think if the total, I don't know, call it, if the total cost is probably, what would you say, maybe, call it 12 million to 11 million?
That was the,
That was this other slide here.
that's the one where I got the numbers.
Yeah,
a
where
little off.
yeah,
14 million.
well, that's
Say-
the high range.
say 12 to
So,
14.
Let's just call it, yeah.
Yeah,
So quick question on the cost estimates. since now have an idea on the time frame, the estimates you're looking at the cost of all of this 3 years from now, or 2 years from now when they actually start the work?
These are present dollars, is that, if that's
Right.
what you're
That's
asking?
the present.
It's present dollars.
Right.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think that this is a great project and it's something that this board has wanted to do. I want to know if we have, maybe I missed it in the report, what kind of plan do we have to sock away a percentage of our budget so that we can pay for this? Are we gonna look for grants? What do you propose, how do you think the best way to fund this is, I mean, besides with our property taxes?
One of the other things that Moffett and Nickel are in another way they're beneficial, is that they can help us seek grant funding. You wanna talk
Right,
about a
so,
little bit of that?
yeah, I'd love to
Brad?
hear about that.
Yeah, we have already, as Moffett and Nickel has helped us with in the past, since 2014, they've been our kind of design engineering firm to help the district with conceptual drawings and engineering estimates for the Tiger grants that we've applied for
Yes.
repeatedly. Unfortunately, we've not been successful with those grants in the
Right.
past. So,
That's,
you know, obviously, because of the history, I don't wanna say that we will be successful between now and construction. However, it may be that the board wishes to, instead of using reserves, that we wish to look for some financing. There may be options with Division of Board of Waterways as well, and Moffett and Nickel will help us with that, with those options.
I also
have y'all
think,
had to do that before with your other clients?
We have, I was just gonna add that we, actually not me, but, our corporate, well, we have like 25 offices nationwide in most important cities, Los Angeles, Seattle, blah, blah, blah. In our Long Beach office, which is our corporate headquarters, which is where we have a lot of our, we have 2 or 3 people that, are kind of specialized in seeking out grant fundings. In fact, we just got, there was something on the Bob site the other day, that's our internal web page. Bob Nickel was the last founder of the company. Anyway, there are people within our firm that know and have lists and tabulations of the availability of these grants, so yes, that's something we can help you with, most definitely.
So what's the average size of the grants that you've gotten for your clients?
Well, the work that I am the most familiar with is actually for boat launch facilities. And with those, the largest grant we've gotten for that, West Side was just under $2 million. Calusa was $3 million. Yeah, those for boat launch, but that's, through Division of Boating and Waterways, state parks. I would say there are ones that are out for fishing piers, public fishing piers, but I don't know if this would qualify for that. I would really want to check with I just know about the more obvious ones for, like I say, for boat launch ramps and things like that, but, and then I know there's like the big grants, rubbing infrastructure grants for like guest dogs. I would want to talk with our internal people that are a little bit more expert on that to give you a better idea.
I also would, I don't know if we'll get a grant or not, I hope we do. But I think until we have a really solid project plan, it's hard to get money. So I think if we have a really well-designed plan that we can get tons of letters of support for, that the likelihood of our ability to get grant funding is gonna be a lot better. So I think getting a strong plan together is definitely in our best interest.
But I would add not just the project plan, but the financial plan, which would be included in the project plan. Because we're gonna have to sock away money, for this, and this is.
Well, usually in a grant application, you would have a financial
Yeah,
piece too.
no, I know, but I mean, that's not in here, which I get, it's so preliminary. But I would feel more comfortable with not just the project plan, but with the financial plan, I mean, even before the project plan, because I think that the proposal, I mean, this is very general, I mean, it's good, and again, I know we're in the preliminary phases, but, this is you know, more expensive than some of the other projects that we did. I'm not saying it's not worth it, I just think the public's entitled to understand how we're getting the money, how we're gonna be spending the money, and you laid out a really good preliminary plan, I just would want more detail. I mean, I'm in agreement with you about the project plan, which would include a financial plan, for me to feel comfortable with that.
So I'd like to make a motion then, and that is to, the recommended motion. Would you like me to read it?
Mm-hmm.
Receive update on the Pillar Point Harbor H-Dock replacement project. Authorize interim general manager to execute work directive amendment with Moffett and Nichols for the amount not to exceed $1.318 million to combine this project with the Johnson Pier reconfiguration project for design, engineering, permitting, and construction management for both projects.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
The only question I had was those H-dock berths, are they single or double?
They're all double, aren't they?
They're all double.
They're gonna be bigger, right?
Anything
That's what you
else?
Yeah, they'll be bigger.
Nope.
Okay. Can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Matthews,
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz,
Aye.
Commissioner Shankarelli,
Aye.
President Brennan,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryder.
Aye.
Great. Okay, so the next item, which is related, is item 8, Johnson Pier piling repairs. And we've already heard a little bit about what that's gonna entail, so, Anita?
So Johnson Pier has a wooden timber platform commonly referred to as the work dock landing. And unlike the majority of Johnson Pier, which is supported by concrete pilings, this work dock landing area is only supported by
Oh, sorry.
wooden timber pilings. These wood pilings are in very poor shape due to the decades of wood-boring marine organisms eating away at them. Pictures on page 8.3, or 8-3 of the staff report show the condition of these pilings, if you'd like to look at that. Based on a site visit and experience with similar jobs, Moffett and Nichols engineers have assessed that these critical support pilings can be sleeved and reinforced with rebar and concrete for the time being as a protective measure. This would be a temporary solution until the district is able to reconfigure the Johnson Pier terminus, which would eliminate the wooden platform altogether. The agreement with Moffett and Nichols would include 4 tasks: a condition survey, repair design, regulatory compliance, and construction support. A proposal from Moffett and Nichols is also attached to the staff report as Exhibit A. The district already has a professional services agreement in place with Moffett and Nichols, but this project exceeds the general manager's procurement authority of $25,000, and that's why it's here before the board today. And as mentioned before, the current year's approved budget includes $2.2 million for the Johnson Pier repairs and Johnson Pier docks. So the funding for the repairs to support the piling is included in that amount. And the recommended motion would be, after the presentation, would be to authorize the interim general manager to issue a work directive agreement with Moffett and Nichols for design, engineering, permitting, and construction support for the sleeving of critical support pilings at Pillar Point Harbor's Johnson Pier terminus timber platform for an amount not to exceed $42,300. The presentation on the project as well as the proposal is attached to the staff report. Is it gonna be Brad or Neil? Brad?
Yeah.
Okay.
I talked a lot about piles.
Okay.
It just occurred to me, I don't know why I didn't think of when you were talking about it, but the Trinidad Pier project, I believe that entire thing was grant funded. In fact, that's how we came into it, was they were gonna lose their funding. But I believe it's owned, it's a Native American tribe that owns it. I think it may have been through, I don't really know the details of that, of what it was, but I will contact them and find out what the source of that was. But that was largely built with grant funding, so I'll find out, but it may not be applicable
That's a
here.
different, situation.
Right. Okay, actually, I went and took a look at this before the meeting, and it's, yeah, there's these 2 piles right here that is, are the most critical. This was an inspection that was done, I guess I didn't write it down, but it was done 3 or 4 years ago, by another firm. And these two, so that, these are the rows of the pile caps. So it's the beam that goes between all the piles. And then these two are missing, and they've got like, I was actually able to see them today, they even look worse than this. There's like an air gap between the two. So there's like nothing there. And the freezers are sitting over them, and they've got their compressors, and they're pretty heavy, so these are pretty critical. These other ones that have the red X's are what we call the fender piles, and even though they're totally eaten out, they don't support the pier, they're just for boats to moor up against. But these two here are pretty critical. Now, driving new piles, this was the detail off that drawing. And this type of a system, where they jacket it, what they do is they run a fiber, the photo might be easier, but there's a deteriorated pile on the inside, and they put a fiberglass jacket over it, and they seal it at the bottom, they run it into the bottom, and then they fill the whole thing up with grout. Or they'll put a steel cage in between the deteriorated timber and the fiberglass, and then they fill it with grout, and it basically turns it like into a big concrete pile. I've just done, yeah, so here, this is Simpson's, there's a couple of companies that make them, but this is what it looks like. These are two projects I've recently done. This is a timber fish buying pier up in Bodega Bay. So it's a project that Neil and I have been working on for the last couple of years, but this is the jacket in place. They just put it in with a diver, and then they fill it up with grout. This is over at Tiburon. This is one that just got completed in January. Similar kind of a deal where they went in, they jacketed it. These they didn't have to run to the bottom, and then they fill it up with grout, and it repairs the pile. And this pile here, this one they actually did was similar to the ones under Johnson Fir. It was totally severed. There was like a 4-foot gap in it. They came in, put the sleeve in, jacked it up, filled it with grout, and they're using it. So this is just the process. It's actually fairly simple. He's filling it here with the grout. Here they pumped it in. They're actually getting ready to pump it in with a hose to these. And it's a fairly, you don't have to mobilize a crane. What am I doing here? Yeah, it's fairly cost effective. You could probably do it here for, I'm gonna guess, $100,000 for those two. I think, yeah, Tiburon here, oops, keep doing that. There was like 6 of them, and I think that was 100,000. At Bodega, they did 7 or 8. I think that was 140,000. I would think the permitting for this would be pretty easy. We could probably do it under an emergency permit. I mean, it's like 2 piles. It's no pile driving. Yeah, I would think that. Anyway, so our proposal is to do the permitting, environmental compliance. You pretty much have the drawings. They were done by another firm, but if they're gonna go out on our name, if we're gonna stamp it, be the engineer of record, we have to own the design, so we would kinda have to clean up the drawings and put it on our title block, and then we would assist during bid and construction with the bidders and review their qualifications, and then, you know, our kind of normal construction support oversee that they're doing it right, and we're doing submittals, and so that's what our proposal reflects, and I think we could have this done. I'm assuming that the permitting would go easily, that we could have permits within 3 to 4 months. We could be out to bid by March, April. We're running out of that. But no, I think we could. I don't know if we could have permits by then, but I think, yeah, we could probably turn this around within a couple of weeks to get it out.
After you get all this other stuff done, right? Like the
Well-
actual construction part, I'm just worried, I'm not, and I didn't see it in here, and maybe I missed it in terms of the, report. Like, what kind of disruption would there be for our businesses or the tenants?
Pretty much none.
Okay.
None.
So, and I'm not familiar with the construction, so I'm
So just-
sorry about my ignorance
Just
on
to
that.
explain, just so everybody's on the same page, and I think Commissioner Crawley is, but just so the public understands, this project would be basically a temporary fix.
Yes.
Because we have an emergency situation, an unsafe situation going on right now with an unstable pier because, you know, things have rotted, whatever, and we've got heavy freezers that could, we hope, not crash through, you know, to the water, creating a disaster. So this would just be like a temporary fix thing that we would do, but then eventually, a couple of years down the road, when we get to the big project, this would all go away. Is that correct? Is that a good,
That's correct.
okay,
Because
is
we'd be
correct.
driving new piles?
because we would
Because we'll
be
doing the-
putting in a solid pier in that section versus what is,
This is temporary.
Right.
this is just like this sort of wooden pier that got added after the fact, correct? Where the freezers are sitting.
Yeah, it must have been, I don't know
Yeah.
when that was added, but it's sure, it looks
Okay.
like.
What was that, Lisa?
It was there first.
Oh, it was there
I was gonna ask,
first.
did
The
they-
timber
must
farm
be
was?
older.
And then they built Johnson Pier around it.
Yeah.
Well, that would explain why the timber piles are so far gone. I didn't know
That's
that.
so weird.
I would have guessed it.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
have
timber
we-
piles, same with, in all of those photos that other jobs I've done, all around the world, the timber piles are most susceptible to the wood boring organisms, at the tidal range.
Mm.
So
Right,
I'm used to them hourglassing, these are unusually eaten, seems like from within, where the
Yep.
exterior still is there.
Yeah, and that's not that uncommon. I've do work for Capitola Wharf, for Santa Cruz, for Seacliff, and pretty much most of the timber piers in Northern California. And that's the torpedo worms that get in the inside. Typically, you've got like 2 inches of creosote in the outer shell. They find a little check, a vertical split, and they can get in. Once they can get past the creosote, then they get on the inside and they go up and down. We've got sections cut through them where you see these holes
Mhm.
where they're doing their eating out of the interior, and that's typically done in the intertidal range between about -1 foot mean low water up to about 5 feet. And yes, I was just out there, it was about a 1 foot tide this afternoon, and you've got probably at least 15 piles, mainly say these fender piles, they're just like totally gone.
So how many piles would we be replacing with this project that's outlined here?
About 2 years ago, as Brad said, the board did authorize us to have divers go
Mhm.
out and look at
Yeah, I
it under
remember
the
that.
direction of another firm. As Brad indicates here, the diver survey
Mhm.
found largely the exterior pilings, the fender pilings that are not structural support were eaten away. But these two that Brad's identified here have significant
So it's just those two?
challenges. We believe with, Brad's engineering team looking at them, Moffett Nickel, if we replace not replace, but sleeve
Yeah,
just these two, as I said previously, this will be a stopgap measure
got it.
until we're able to move forward with the larger reconfiguration project.
Okay,
And
great.
yes, you're accurate, Sabrina, that eventually this whole wooden platform will be demolished
Going away.
and replaced with a concrete structure and new concrete seismic compliant pilings.
so, okay, getting back to my original line of questioning about the possible there's no disruption, you're saying, but, how does that work with the fish buyers, freezers? I mean, have we talked to the fish buyers and gotten what their thoughts are on?
That's the whole idea.
And I don't know, I mean,
Yeah, the whole idea behind sleeving them in place, and I gotta say, that was kind of my idea originally, because the other projects I've done where we've had restaurants hanging out over water and we're able to sleeve the pilings.
okay.
Again, this is something that happens worldwide.
yeah, I just don't know that part of this
So I think-
business, so
I think-
that's why I'm asking.
So sleeving the pilings in place actually ends up making it, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Brad, this is my interpretation and what my experience has been, that it actually makes it almost like a hollow pipe. The
Okay.
wood in the middle is it's no longer structurally
Okay.
there, but we've
Okay,
now got,
it's like a case
it's
around.
got a structurally sound
Yeah.
pipe
So-
that now supports the piling between the failed area.
Inside, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And the good
That
thing
helps.
about it, the good thing about it is it does not, the sleeving didn't require us to, in the past, to remove a restaurant, you know, and to
Right.
drive new
Okay.
pilings. Just like in this instance, it's not going to require us to remove and significantly disrupt the fish buyer's operations. We're not gonna have to remove the refrigeration,
Okay.
pull out decking, and drive new pilings.
Okay, that's very helpful. Now I can visualize it better. Thanks, John.
Yeah, so this project would prevent us from having a disruption, and the
You
disruption.
know, I know.
Yeah, the
I'm trying to
disruption.
visualize it. I
If the
couldn't-
freezers fall through, then we have a disruption, so this would stop that from happening.
Right. This is at Tiburon, this is the ferry walkway that goes between the ferry that takes you out to Angel Island and the shore. And every day, I mean, I don't know if it's thousands, but certainly hundreds of people go across it. This was never shut down during the project.
Okay.
All the work was done underneath, same thing like here in Bodega Bay. This timber trestle that goes out to the fish buyers at the end of their hoist, they still went out every day, they drove their light forklift on the other side. Well,
Okay, I get it. I just
Yeah,
wanted to try to visualize it.
And to be clear, perfectly clear, I don't wanna mislead the public or, you know, fish buyers. There will be some disruption, but the fish buyers have brought to my attention and to the district's attention that they've got, as we do, concerns
They-
about
yeah,
these
I can see the reason for that.
these pilings being compromised. So I think the disruption, and your rough estimate of time to do this, it's gonna be less than a week, you know. s-
Oh,
Yeah, they
once
said
they're out
that-
there,
Yeah.
max,
about
maybe
two.
two.
Yeah.
It
that's
just
what he-
depends on their stage.
That's helpful, John, thanks. I was just trying to visualize it and, I mean, I've never dealt with this, so I'm not that familiar. Thank you.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the interim general manager to issue a work directive agreement with consultant Moffitt and Nickel for design, engineering, permitting, and construction support for the sleeving of critical support pilings at the Pillar Point Harbor's Johnson Pier Terminus timber platform for an amount not to exceed $42,300.
I'll second.
Can we get a roll call?
President Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Mateo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryder,
Aye.
Commissioner Tancarello.
Aye.
Okay, next we have item 9, Pillar Point Harbor Fishing Pier, ADA access walkway and adjacent breakwater rehabilitation project, and this is Anita's item.
Okay, this is actually just an update from Moffitt and Nickel as to the repairs for the fishing pier. The fishing pier is almost 30 years old and provides fishing activities to the public. It was constructed in 1989. It's next to the existing riprap breakwater. It consists of a concrete pile timber pier structure, an access walkway structure, and an original revetment retaining wall. The present breakwater extends beyond the fishing pier to provide protection for the Pillar Point Inner Harbor. Due to the ongoing timber deterioration and the breakwater erosion failure, a 2012 condition survey conducted by GHD found that this area also needed substantial repairs. Along with the supporting riprap erosion and failing timber issues, the fishing pier walkway and terminus platform need alteration for ADA compliance. In October 2017, the district entered into a work directive agreement with Moffitt and Nickel for the project design, engineering, regulatory compliance, invitation to bid, and construction support. Again, Moffitt and Nickel is here to provide an update on their progress on this project, and copies of the presentation as well as their proposal from 2017 are attached to the staff report. And once they're done with the presentation, the motion would be to receive the fishing pier repair project update from them, and that's it. There's no other action needed. The policy implications, this is consistent with the Harbor District's mission to provide a safe and well-maintained harbor. And as far as fiscal implications or budget status, there's no new fiscal implications. Fiscal year 18-19, the current year's approved budget allocates $450,000 already for the fishing pier repair project at Pillar Point Harbor. Brad, again?
No, so
Oh, is this
No.
happening? Okay.
I
More now.
Yeah, so,
Is it helpful to have the lights off or do you want them on?
It's helpful if we're gonna look at this to have them off.
yeah,
I'll
so,
add one more thing real quick, just for, you know, as Anita kind of went over a little bit. In August of 2018, we finalized the San Mateo County Harbor District's proactive ADA self-evaluation and transition plan. And on the fishing pier walkway and the fishing pier itself, the terminus, there were numerous ADA compliance issues, as this is a very old fishing pier, as Anita said. Moffitt Nichols' proposal and the design engineering that they are currently underway with for the rehabilitation of the finger pier addresses every single one of these ADA issues.
Yeah, I mean, you can see here the access walkway has this metal kind of old school railing, which is not ADA compliant. It allows people to pass through. You know, ADA has that, you can't pass a 4-inch spear through any part of a guardrail. And this does qualify as a guardrail. It's not a handrail or just a railing. Once it's called a guardrail, you gotta have a pretty tight opening control. And the same thing for the timber fishing pier. It has, I think, 8-inch gaps. So it was a different code when it was built. The walkway itself is still pretty flat. Last time I checked, it's in good shape, but it's undermined. So some of the rock has obviously been displaced inside and outside, and so you kind of want to fix that before it actually affects the walkway itself. It's not like cracking or falling in. So we're going to kind of repair that. Just a quick overview of some of the things we're doing. We're in addition to fixing all the guardrail issues, we're going to basically do new guardrail all along both sides of the access walkway and the fishing pier itself. We're going to reinstall the deck here. The deck boards are in good shape for the most part, but the gaps are too big. They just shrink over time. And the gaps, when you get over a 1/4 inch, are not ADA compliant anymore. So we want to pick those deck boards up, squeeze them together, all the ones that are good, and we're going to be short a few pieces at the end, and we'll just put new deck pieces there. So you don't have to replace the entire deck, you're just going to reinstall it. We're going to put in these 6 fishing slots. They're about 1 foot wide, and a little gap in that, the railing kind of angles up, but you put a little gap there. I can show you in a little bit. And each one of those yellow lines is new lighting. These circles are new lights. So that's the little isometric view of what the fishing slot looks like in the top rail that's sloping. And you got a few more railings here to keep the gaps down. And that is that didn't come out very well in blue. But that's how we're showing these little ceiling mounted type light fixtures, kind of recessed inside of the rail so they don't stick out of the rail. And that's what we're going to be putting all along the walkway and the fishing pier.
Is there lighting there now?
No.
No.
There might be
It's not functioned.
Is there a light on the fishing pier?
It's not functioned in quite some time.
It was originally there, I think, but it's not anymore. And there's a fish cleaning sink.
Is there a way to do lighting that is isn't shining out?
Yeah, we had to do this, so there, you can't see it right now, but there's a little back panel so it doesn't shine onto the water.
I see.
It's in a little nook, and it's only shining forward, and it shines a little bit up, but it's mostly shining out.
Okay.
It was a lot to pick a fixture that would function in a really tight space.
Are they LED?
This one is, yeah. So this is just a cross section of the walkway, in place of the freestanding metal. The metal railing out there is just flush mounted to the top of these 12x12s, and so it really wobbles. And it's probably wobbled for a long time. So this is a little bit more stout. This is all going to be made out of the same plastic lumber that you have out in Johnson Pier right now, so it's pretty good stuff. It's going to have a little brace here for strength. And you got a water line on this side, and you got an electrical line on the other side. So what you're seeing here is in a place where the rock is slumped, we're just going to put new rock, and then we're going to grout this area underneath and try to reestablish that foundation before it gets worse.
That makes,
So it's a little hokey, but you kind of, that's really the best thing you can do is kind of pack that concrete in there, and then grout the riprap in place is what's keeping it there now, so that the rock is already grouted, and so it's working pretty well. But it's basically only about 3 feet in height. And this guardrail is ADA height now. Got some nice isometric views of what it will look like on the inside and on the outside. It's just for curiosity's sake, if you want to see what it'll look like. I don't think I have any more slides after that. So yeah, we just submitted 95% last month. There's not that much I anticipate to go to the next phase to get to 100%. So I'm saying that, well, March or soon in April, we could finalize the design.
We have permits.
We have permits, yes.
yeah, that's the hard part.
And we're also,
The permits took a while, but we
Yeah.
have them.
we're also putting in a new fish cleaning station out there that'll be lighted and a filtration system.
Okay, and it looks like we've already approved the cost for this project, so this is just an update, right?
Yes, this is
Okay.
an update.
Okay, great. Any
Thank you.
I have
questions?
one quick question, somewhat related to this, is the lifetime of, this is about 30 years you said? So the repairs that are necessary, is that pretty standard for this sort of thing?
For timber, yeah, I would say so.
No, I'm thinking of the erosion of the rock armory.
Yeah,
Just se-
that's harder to pinpoint what caused that.
Yeah, it
Because
seems
it's happening on
strange.
the inside also, so it's not this wave action.
No,
It's on the inside. So it's something that's happening, I suspect, lower, down, just settlement or consolidation of something lower. Yeah, that's kind of where we're scratching our heads, like, why would that go on the
Yeah.
inside? There's no waves.
okay. thanks.
So, it doesn't look like they rolled down due to wave action. I think
No.
they're just settling.
The other thing is, we did evaluate the pilings, the structural pilings underneath of the wooden platform, the terminus of the fishing pier, and they're still very sound. And then the decking is a real thick, it's almost 3 inches thick wood decking. So in evaluating everything, it was, and it's in relatively good condition. The only, it's in actually a remarkable condition for 30-year-old wood. And the only issue again is just that it's not, the gaps are not ADA compliant.
Right.
So we need to pull them up, but it was not, they can last another 30 years. They're in great shape.
Yeah.
So we're gonna reuse them.
So I want a follow-up question on that is, if you, see if I can point, maybe if I just go over there and point at it. The foot of this thing, here, this area here also is failing. Is this gonna take care of that? Or should we,
That's not part of the
it's not?
project limit now.
Okay.
And
You know what I'm talking about? Is that?
yeah, I do, Ed, and at one point, we had discussed, because there's also some other areas where within the harbor hall, as you make a turnaround, past entrance to ABC docks, there's also some other areas over there that have sloughed off as well. And we were gonna consider that whole,
Oh, I see.
whole
Okay.
repair of that
Separate
riprap
project.
as a separate project. We're
Yeah.
focusing at present on this one, but it may very well be when as we discuss and we put it out to bid, and we, talk about having a mobilization, contractor out here putting riprap, that we just go ahead and have them evaluate that, and maybe come back for a change order.
Okay.
But that'll just be repair to the protective, shoreline protection riprap.
Yeah, we'll probably just have to make sure we have space in the permits for the quantities, because the permits give you caps on the quantities and stuff, we can check and see.
That'd be good,
It's not a lot of rock.
right.
It's 200 cubic yards, so what, 350 tons or 300 tons of rock. It's not a big amount.
And it's repair, it's not expansion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, great, all right, well, let's go on then. Thank you so much for coming, and we certainly got a lot covered tonight, so, thanks.
Thank you.
That's right, yeah, thank you.
So next we have the, first look at fiscal year 2019-20 preliminary budget, and this is Julie's item.
Okay, good evening, Commissioners. Hi. Discussion item number 10 is the first look of the budget for the period between July 1st, 2019 and June 30th, 2020. This first look is based on information available, and the estimates will continue to be refined as more information becomes available, like the presentation that we just had. I'm going to go through the attachment, which if you look on page 10-5 on attachment 1, that would be the beginning of the budget document. And then if you want to turn to page 4, where it says budgetary highlights, it's a little summary of what all the detail in this budget is about. If you look at the operating revenues on this summary page, you'll notice that they're projected at $4.5 million, which is a 2.25% increase. And non-operating revenues are projected to increase a little under 2%, $7.5 million, for a total revenue of $12.1 million. 7.6 of that comes from property taxes, and those revenues are expected to increase slightly, primarily due to expected inflationary increases like raising the fees and rates for our services. I received an estimate from the San Mateo County Auditor Controller's Department on the property tax increase. Salary, wages, and benefit expenditures is projected to decrease currently, and that is because this fiscal year, this board approved a $2.3 million pay down
Yeah.
in the unfunded CalPERS long-term liability. I did not have any amounts included in this budget for the next fiscal year pay down. If we were to pay that amount down, it would be $2.7 million to pay off the entire liability. I can bring to the next meeting an analysis to give you more information on whether or not we can do that. But as we go through this budget document, you can see kind of the projections of how we expect to spend down our money on capital projects and what that would mean. And you might get an idea of what the future might look like. And I guess, these are all guesses, you know, educated guesses, but that's the information that we have currently. The non-personnel expenses are expected to decrease slightly, and that's primarily due to an estimated $830,000 election cost of this fiscal year, which won't be there in the next fiscal year. The first look presents capital asset expenditures of $6.4 million, and that would result in a decrease in our working capital of $2.6 million. And I've looked back at, you know, other budget documents, and working capital wasn't a term used, but basically what that means is you take your short-term assets minus your short-term liabilities. So it's all your cash, all your accounts receivable on a short-term basis, minus accounts payable and things, you know, bills that were due but not paid until after the end of the fiscal year. Now, if you want to turn to page, well, basically page 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are informational pages that just provide some of the history and the district today. But if you want to turn to page 10, there's staffing authorizations. I haven't added or subtracted any positions here. This is exactly as presented in the revised budget of 2018-19, which included a couple extra positions, a training, Harbor Patrol training officer, and also a new deputy harbor worker. So this would authorize the district to hire 40 full-time employees in total. If you want to go to 10-16 or page 12, it describes the basis of budgeting versus accounting. And so here at the district, we have this budget document. The budget document is primarily modified cash flow. That again is only taking into consideration short-term assets minus short-term liabilities, revenues, and expenditures. Our accounting is a full accrual accounting method where you would record depreciation expense. So you're recording the capital asset as an asset, and then you're depreciating it over the years of the life of the asset. The revenues are recorded when they're earned in accounting instead of when they're received for our budget. Obligations and expenditures are recorded at the time the commitments are incurred in the accounting and when a commitment is made through an encumbrance or an expense for the budget. And we don't have any principal on debt, but that would be another kind of difference between our basis of budgeting versus our basis of accounting. So you won't see in any of these pages, for example, a depreciation expense or funding for our OPEB liabilities, long-term OPEB liabilities, only the short-term portion. The next page is, on page 13, is a 3-year comparative financial schedule. This is all the detail that went into those summary pages that we talked about. So I'm not going to go through it in that much of a detail, but I just wanted to make you aware that, you know, this is here and available. This includes all the departments, the administrative department, Pillar Point, and Oyster Point Marina. There's a couple graphs on the district revenue of, you know, what makes up district's revenue. 60% is property tax. A large portion is the berth and slip fees at 28%. And then the rest of it is leases, caps, events, RV lot launch, miscellaneous revenue, grants, and interest income. The expenditure, 43% in this particular first look at the budget, was for the replacement of capital assets. 36% is for salaries and benefits, and then the other 20% or so is administrative costs and other costs at Pillar Point Marina or Oyster Point Marina and Pillar Point Harbor. On the next page, you have a 5-year projected capital asset expenditure list, and this is something that we worked on to identify in which year these capital programs, where the money, in which year we would expect the money to be spent. So for in fiscal year 2018-19, for example, we've spent around $900,000. We're expecting another a little over $500,000 to come up to $1.4 million for the rest of this fiscal year. The following fiscal year, we have, you know, the West Trail project, the launch ramp dredging project, and Surfers Beach sand projected to be largely complete, and some design and engineering costs. So that's $5 million in the 1920 budget, and these are like cash flow projections. In the 2021 budget, you'll see $700,000 for the Johnson Pier terminus.
And 7 million.
Yeah, thank you, Anita, 7 million. And we just found out tonight that's a little bit low, on the low side, so we might have to increase that amount. The Johnson Pier HDOC, $1.2 million, and the launch ramp improvement restroom boat wash at $1 million. And then one of the things that have been talked about is replacing all the piers at kind of on a staggered basis to minimize the effect that we'll have on the rest of the harbor as you're replacing those piers. So you'll see those out additional years. And then Oyster Point Marina, you can see that maybe there's some construction in next fiscal year. The Dock 12 would be in construction for the 1920 and the 2021 fiscal years. Design and engineering in 1920 with the construction of Dock 13 in 2021. And so this again has like a staggered
Schedule.
yeah, cash outflow. The administrative enterprise resource planning system, we're not projecting to spend any money this current fiscal year, but hope to get that in place over the next 2 years. So we'll see that broken up in between 2 fiscal years. And then you have a summary at the bottom of, 1.8 million for the remainder of this year, $6.4 million for the following year, and so on and so forth. So if you want to turn to page 18 and what that means to what the district's working capital is, and I just made some assumptions based on, the information that I've seen, and so operating revenues, again, if we increase our rates and fees at 3% to reflect an inflationary rate, that first row would be reflected, it starts at 4.3, and then it goes down to 3.3 in 18-19, that's $1 million decrease. And non-operating revenues, 2% increase.
Why is that?
Why is there a decrease?
Year over year.
Yes, I should know that. Let me look back in the notes in the beginning.
It might have to do with the leases or the Oyster
I was
Point part of
wondering,
it.
yeah, because
That's
that was
part of it.
reflected in the narrative too, and here that it would,
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
But I
That's
think
part
they
of
were
it.
looking at a 3% increase.
Oh, I know why. Okay, I remember why now. There's $1 million that was budgeted in this fiscal year for the funding of capital assets. And so in this budget, I'm recommending that capital assets be shown as a negative. So if you go back to the previous page, you see negative numbers listed under the capital assets for the grant funding.
Okay,
What
so-
page are we on?
So page 16, you can see like FEMA funding of $1.5 million in 1920. That number was budgeted,
Page
As a-
1016, which,
yeah,
Actually, I have
10-20,
10-20, okay.
yeah.
So can I ask you a question about the capital asset piece, because that was originally called, and I don't know what the name is, so long as it's clear to understand that those are like the grant funds, because capital asset can be a term of art too, right? So that's why we had it under non-operating revenue. So is there, what would be considered capital assets? Only the grant money kind of thing, or would you, other things be in there too? Because that, like I said, can be construed in a different way.
Right, so like the SAVE grants, for
Yes,
example,
yes.
those are operating grants. Those would,
Not- Okay.
well, no, those are operating grants because,
Okay, so you're
as
gonna
a
divide
dis-
those up.
yeah, so
Okay.
non-operating revenues, it just kind of, when it's presented that way, you know, you're projecting that you're gonna get a grant, but then it's not matching the expense, and then so you know, it's just a way to help clarify that that grant goes with that capital asset, and if we don't get that grant, then we have to find an alternative way to fund that capital asset, so it's just presented in a slightly different way.
Yeah, okay, so like if we got a grant for, the Johnson Pier stuff, that would go under capital asset then?
Yeah, it'd be showing as a negative under the funding of
Okay.
capital asset. And,
Okay.
you know, this is, again, the first look.
Yeah, no,
So if
it's
anyone
great.
has some recommendations on, you know, how you would like to see it different, you know, I'm certainly open to that too. So the non-operating revenues, I projected that they would increase at 2%. I know the property tax revenues, you never think that they can increase more, but they keep increasing more and more, so that's just based on what we expect this year. Salaries, wages, and benefit expenditures, we, you know, have MOUs that go out 5 years, and all benefits keep increasing in cost, so I projected those to increase at 5%. And the same with other expenditures, you know, other costs are projected to increase too, and so that kind of gives a buffer, you know, if you project the revenues to increase at a slower rate than the expenditures, then you're kind of giving yourself a buffer in these, in the 5-year projections. And so with that said, if you take the revenues and the normal expenditures and you subtract those from the revenues, you get between 1.3 and 2.6 million dollars every fiscal year to spend on capital assets, or what I call one-time expenditures.
That's what I mean about capital assets when we do the grant funding thing, categorizing some of that.
Right,
Under
so,
capital assets, so,
yeah,
I
so-
just have to see if I can get that cleared around my head.
So this line item, capital expenditures, if you look at, you know, these projections, in 17-18, we spent $3 million. This year, almost 8 million, which should match the total on page.
What page are you on? I'm just trying to.
On 10-22,
Right here.
Yeah.
the capital expenditure line item.
It's right here.
I see it, yeah.
Yeah, so the 1.8 million is matching what the capital,
revenue.
projected capital asset expenditures on
Yeah.
the previous page.
Oh, I get it, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, so, you know, $6.4 million for this coming up fiscal year we're projecting to spend. And so then, total revenues less expenditures is the amount of cash that we need to balance our budget. And the district is starting off with beginning capital, working capital of 16.65 or 66 million dollars. And so if you take, you know, what our actual was at the end of 17-18 of an actual increase in cash of 1.7 plus our beginning balance working capital, at the end of the year we have $18.4 million, and then the following year, the next fiscal year, we spend 2 million, then we get down to 16.2 million. So you can see as you go on, in 21, 22, for instance, we have $500,000 left if, you know, these estimates, of course, you know, they're gonna change every year as you get more information and as you can project forward. Some of the things that aren't included in this first look of the budget are things like an allocation between the public and the enterprise funds that I've seen in the previous budget. So that's maybe something that will be in the preliminary budget. There will be some other things included in the preliminary budget. And these numbers will change, like I just got confirmation from the election department that I projected 830,000, it's really gonna be 850,000, Johnson Pier, we just have a new estimate for that, so there might be changes, and I'll spell those out for the April meeting.
Can we get, like, on the reduction in election costs, like, can you put more charts in here? Because some of us like to look at things really visually, and in the past, we've had that done in our previous budgets, but I know it takes time to get to that. But that would be really helpful. Like, if we could see comparisons and that sort of thing, that would be really good.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how much we're saving in election costs, like, over time.
Okay.
How much savings there'll be, like, in the next 10 years or something.
Why would we be saving?
Because we're transitioning
To
to
both
district
district
districts,
elections.
yes,
Yeah.
it's gonna save
But it's
a lot of
gonna
money.
be every year instead of every other year, right?
There will be saving?
No, that we'd have to budget if it's district elections, right? Is it every?
I think it's every other year,
Yeah.
It's every 4 years, there's
Really?
3 and then 2.
Just like we have now.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know why I thought it was every year, because I thought it was, anyway.
Well, we used to split it and
Yeah,
budget
that's-
it half and half, so
Yeah.
that we wouldn't have a big hit in
Every,
one year.
yeah. I do have a question about the UALs. You had asked, it's on page 10-2 in the actual report. You asked if we could give you additional direction to put a line item in there for the pension liability pay downs or not. Do you still want that direction? I would love to see something, you know, if we included that in a budget and what it looks like and what it looks like without, and if you find a sweet spot, what it could look like. Because we're gonna have, especially if we're gonna sock away funds for Johnson Pier, we're gonna have to balance that with whatever we pay down. You paid down 50% last year, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, the whole board needs to decide
I
whether
know,
that's a
but
good idea.
Well, I understand, but I would like to see a comparison, because last year we thought it was a good idea to pay it down. So, yeah, I mean, that's, you asked for suggestions, and so that's my suggestion.
Yeah,
I think we have to look at our cash flow and see if that's a good idea.
No, I
and
know, that's what I'm
I think
saying.
we
I'm
need to
just
get
saying
that
that,
feedback from our staff.
that's why I'm asking,
Yeah,
that's
well,
what I'm asking you.
Well, and I was, you know, further analysis of this line item will be presented at a future board meeting for discussion.
I'm not saying it should be in the budget. I'm
Right,
just saying,
right,
I would
yeah.
like to see a comparison of what it would look like.
Right,
In the
yeah.
different scenarios.
Right.
And that's
Pay
maybe
down.
something we can do a chart.
Yeah,
On-
whatever. I mean, I just wanna see something.
Yeah, and I'm actually encouraging Julie, because Julie, I think, in our discussions, has excellent ideas
Yes.
with regard from her experience on the pros and cons that I think she should bring to the board with regard to the required way that that monies are invested if we pay in advance versus us having our own flexibility with investments that actually may be more beneficial.
You mean in term, that's not the same thing as the pay downs, is there? I don't think there's a minimum requirement.
No,
I'm
I'm sorry,
not-
not requirement, but but they invest the money, we're paying it in
Who's
advance
the
in
they?
reality.
CalPERS.
Yeah, okay.
So CalPERS is a kind of quasi-governmental entity,
yes.
so they can invest
They're a
in
fund.
real estate
Yes.
and stocks
Yes.
and, you know, other countries.
Yes.
And so there is, you know, they've been very successful in getting a big rate of return
Yes.
on their money, but as the years go by, they keep decreasing their discount rate.
Yes.
And so you are at risk that, you know, if the markets
I
go
know.
crashing down, then you've paid CalPERS, but you still have a $2
Oh,
million liability in
exactly.
the end, so
That's why I
it's,
just wanted to see a comparison. I'm not saying we should do it, but I don't know until I see the numbers.
right, yeah.
Last year, we thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, and, you know, it's like, if I have a bunch of money in my savings account and I own a house, do I choose to pay
Right.
off the mortgage? It makes it life nice when you don't have to pay
Right.
the bank, so, you know, there's benefits to paying it down, yes.
Right, but there are other, but we may not need to this year. That's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
we don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, so,
So where are we at with getting feedback from Martin? Because we can't really go much further with this without
Right.
prioritizing, you know, capital projects and.
Anita's been doing a great job. I've been seeing that. I don't know if you want to speak to it, Anita, but I'll say that we are working closely with Martin. He didn't get his back this summary until very recently,
Mhm.
and Anita's going back and forth with him now. We're trying to get something to the board. Go ahead, Anita.
Yeah, actually, Mark, I had to send him an email saying, we've been waiting for this, where is it? And he said he was under the impression we had plenty of time. So anyway, he gave it to us he gave it to us recently, and I've been, it was in draft format, and there was a lot of questions going back, finalizing it. I've taken the information, put it in a spreadsheet like you wanted, and, in April, he's gonna be here. We're asking him to do a presentation, present his notes as well as my spreadsheet to ask for input from you guys as to what you want us to do next. So we actually had a meeting today, John and Julie and I, looking at the preliminary things that I've done, and so that I can get their input as well.
So is that,
Thank you.
are you thinking of doing that at a regular meeting? Is that the
It's up
point?
to you.
Because it seems like maybe we ought to have a special meeting to do that.
I think focusing on board goals, I think would be something that would be beneficial to have a special meeting on. And just as soon as we get our grasp around everything, we've got a draft document from Martin Rush at present.
Mm-hmm.
We've reviewed it. We had a meeting today. We're gonna throw it back at him for a final. And I think at that point, it'd be beneficial to communicate and maybe set up a special meeting to try to
Okay.
pin down the goals.
Okay,
Right.
sounds good.
Sure.
And if we could, is the budget coming back in
Yeah, this is-
April?
Or May.
Yeah, well,
April.
a preliminary budget usually gets adopted in April, and then we put an ad in the paper, we publicize that we've adopted a preliminary budget, and for the general public to comment on that, and then we typically bring that back to the board for a final budget in June.
So then we should, it would be great if we could do that special meeting before we have our regular meeting, if possible.
I mean, before the regular meeting in April?
Yeah, if we can.
Okay.
That way we will already sort it through.
We've got a, no, I was just gonna say that I hate to blame Martin Roush for anything. I should have kept on him more and increased the urgency, but now we've made clear and will continue to make clear that there is more of a sense of urgency than I had let on. I mean, just by me not talking with him, that complacency occurred, and so that was my oversight, and I'll make sure it doesn't happen again.
Okay, but I think we did talk about it at the board retreat, and the understanding was he was gonna be getting back to us quickly, so that was how I thought it was left, but anyway, people get busy, so that's great that that's getting worked on, cause I think that'll help us, cause I don't feel like I really wanna discuss the budget a whole lot without doing that first.
It's a priority for us, and
Yeah.
again, we had a meeting today, about it, so
Yeah.
we're working on it.
Right,
One other thing, Martin did mention, he thought, he was under the impression that this whole draft document was gonna be reviewed by the policy committee. So I don't know if you wanna, I didn't get that, I didn't have that in my notes, but, so I think
Policy
you
committee.
misunderstood maybe.
yeah, I think you misunderstood.
Yeah, cause I think
Yeah.
just the policies would be reviewed.
Yeah.
So, for the special meeting, I'll talk to Martin and find out when he can be, ready for that, because he said this was a draft document and he wants to get our feedback and make it a final document. If he can do that in the next week or two, then we can go ahead and have a special.
It's
meeting.
basically just a list of everything we listed off, right?
Basically, with some, he's grouped it in.
Groupings.
certain- Yeah.
Okay,
And Anita's done a lot more work with regard to, during this interim time, with regard to, implementation documents and, categories for implementation of the goals.
oh,
So
great,
I think it's quite impressive. and
Cool. look forward to that.
Yep.
Okay, so does anybody have anything else about the budget, or are we ready to move on?
Well, Julie, thank you for doing this. I think
Yeah.
It's been very helpful, it was very good.
Ready to move on.
Okay, so next we have, item 11, which is proposed adjustment up to fines, adopt resolution number 19-06, and this is Anita's item.
Okay, the Harbor District's rates and fee schedules are reviewed every year and has been updated regularly. However, let me just go back. When we do these rates and fee schedule review, we update these fees, and they've steadily increased over the years as necessary. However, our fine schedule, that includes the fine amounts for not paying certain fees, has not been reviewed or adjusted since the 1990s. And it is no longer adequate as a deterrent for individuals who fail to comply and pay the appropriate fees, because in some instances, the fine amount is less than the original fee. So why would a person pay a fee if paying the fine is going to be cheaper? So this has been brought to our attention by our harbor operational staff. And after a thorough review of the current schedule of fines, 4 fine amounts at this time are recommended for adjustment. And these 4 fines are listed in a chart on page 11-2 of the staff report. The right-hand column of this chart also shows the amount of fees that an individual needs to pay in order to avoid getting that particular fine. So as you can see, the first fine is violation code 3.10.170 for an unattended vessel. The current fine is $50. We're recommending that we increase that fine to $75. The second one is non-payment of launch ramp fees. The current fine is $22, and we recommend to increase that to $35. Just so that, if the fee's only 14, the fee's 14 and the fine's only 22, it's not much of a deterrent, because you're only gonna get fined on occasion. And the next one, the RV parked overnight without a permit, the current fine is only $50, and actual fee is $52. So if they don't pay the $52, they can pay the fine, which
They
is
save
$2
$2.
less. So we're proposing that fine to be
Benefits that now.
increased to $100. And docking in prescribed area, that current fine is $50, and we're proposing that to be increased to $75. And the violation codes that are listed in the left-hand column can be found in the San Mateo County Harbor District's Ordinance Code Title 3, which is available on the district's website, and I've also listed the address of the location right there. The policy implications, District Ordinance 5.15.010, Section D, authorizes the Board of Harbor Commissioners from time to time to establish by resolution and fix the rate of the wharfage charges and other charges which are appropriate for the use of any of the facilities owned and constructed or services furnished or provided by the district. So you are authorized to do this at any time from time to time. The fiscal implication, the budget status, the increase in fines will, and these 4 fines will result in a minimum increase to the annual revenues to the district, and it will depend on the number of citations that are issued in any given year. The harbor operational staff highly recommends that we make these adjustments at this time. It would give them more teeth as far as, enforcing some of these regulations. So, the motion would be to approve the updated fine amounts for these 4 violations listed in this report and adopt resolution number 19-06, which is also attached to the.
Well, I'll make that motion to approve the updated fine amounts for the 4 violations listed in the report for resolution 1906.
I'll second that.
And I have a couple questions. To me, it seems like some of these fines are still pretty low, and I was just wondering what your feedback was, John.
You're absolutely right, Commissioner Brennan. These are still low. In fact, TurboData, who processes our citations, won't even process citations under $200 for us. So they are low. Our desire, I know, as from direction over 2.5 years, is for compliance, not to generate revenue off the back of people, giving citations to people. So at board direction and we have continued to increase our training for excellent customer service, and part of that is education. So we're educating the public versus trying to take it more of a law enforcement aspect. Our staff do give verbal warnings first, and along with education prior to even writing a citation. So citations are not used as a first resort, more of a last resort. Our staff want to continue our bond with the community and with the public, and frankly, our staff believe that we want to increase fines incrementally. As Anita suggested, unfortunately, we've just neglected the fines as fees have increased, so it has just become ridiculous, if you will. So I gotta say, I heeded staff's advice here in discussion with all of the staff and the deputy harbor masters that are out doing the work daily, and we also compared with other like organizations, what kind of fines that they have, and I wanted to make sure that the public has faith in us, that we in fact are the lowest fines.
Do we have any comparables that we can look at?
I didn't put any in here, I just compared them and had staff compare them, but the other thing that not only are we wanting to incrementally increase from our lack of attention to them, but we also are want to look at our ordinances as a whole, and along with the ordinances, I think another incremental increase, maybe even a more substantial with some ordinance changes, another substantial change at that time would likely be prudent, and at that time I will have more comparisons showing that we are, the new suggested additional changes are consistent with best practices from other local facilities.
Well, I mean, I think the fines, I think the incrementally doing that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you look at percentage-wise, it is pretty big already. It's like double, like for and I get the RV parking, the RV parked overnight without a permit piece. That's double, right? So it's 100%.
How
And
much
so
are
hold
people?
on, I'm not,
It was actually my time to speak, so if you would let me finish and then we could have your turn, I'd appreciate it. So the second part of my question was, do we know what people are paying for RV overnight, say at,
Like a hotel.
Keaton Earham's RV lot, is it $50 or $100 a night? I don't know what the fee is there.
You know, I wanna say a figure, but I'm not certain of what his
Okay.
figures are.
Okay, maybe I
believe
should
they're,
look it up.
yeah.
Because it just seems to me that $100 is not enough. So I'm not really comfortable with that being the fine, $100, because that just seems like that would encourage people. And what I'm really worried about is the fact that we have people camping on our parking areas that are dumping sewage into the stormwater drains. And I wanna discourage that activity. And if we have people parking overnight and camping, we don't have any way to know if they're self-contained and what they're doing with their sewage, you know, unless, I don't know if we're checking, I assume we're not. So to me, it seems like anything we can do to discourage that kind of activity, and $100 looks like a pretty good deal. I don't know. So I'd just be curious, like, in that particular instance especially, what other places are doing and what people would pay to, because if they stayed at the Nearham lot, there's a sewer connection there for every RV, whereas we don't have any sewer connections for any RVs on our property. So that's just like a huge red flag for me, and I'm really concerned that we are doing things to encourage that when we know it's a problem. And if there's a way that we can discourage that, that's what I would like to see. And I think that's what fines are about, is discouraging behavior.
Understood, exactly, and at the board's direction and, you know, with the board's concern for environmental issues and water quality issues, and our relationship with RCD, Resource Conservation District, who has in fact done some fecal indicating bacteria testing at the stormwater drains there in the C lot, and has found evidence that in fact some nefarious activity may be taking place there. I've also, as I believe I've made you aware, we've been approached now by the California Coastal Commission with regard to challenges with the Keaton Earham Arlesees RV park, and us operating this RV park. California Coastal Commission enforcement has been discussing with me at present potential enforcement action. So we're going to have to make, as I indicated earlier, some significant ordinance changes about overnight parking period, and I would agree that you know that $100 fines nowadays are are a drop in the bucket for many people. Again, TurboData only deals with $200 fines. So just so the public's reassured, the district in this increase now is still, as Commissioner Brennan is saying, maybe not addressing enough deterrent, and is definitely lower than other facilities' fines. I believe that to be true. I know, and again, part of my agreement in what is written here as a proposal is based on the strong feelings that I've had from the entire board about wanting to always be sensitive to the public and our members of the public that are on relatively tight budgets and may from time to time be guilty of infractions and get citations. And we do need to increase the deterrent level, and this was my numbers that I arrived at. Again, you know, the current fine for the RV park is $50, which was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
When the normal fee to spend the night there is $52, and you don't get caught every time. So, raising it 100%
Right.
to $100 as a first incremental change, with the understanding we're going to be making we're going to have to make more significant changes at that particular location. And again, talking with staff who build up relationships with all of our customers, relationships and trust with the public. This is what we came up with at present as a first incremental change.
When do you think we would be looking at ordinance changes? Would that be later this year?
We're looking at them, I'm looking at them right now, and I hope to be bringing something to the board relatively quickly. We're also just trying to prioritize which ordinances we want to have the board look at first, or if we want to make an overall change at the same time. So that's something that's very important to myself and to all of our staff that do the work daily. And it's very important to the public as well, because having good rules and regulations or ordinances is what makes makes any facility a good place to be at. And our ability to be able to enforce the rules and regulations is just best for the environment and best for the atmosphere. Just because largely there are always a few bad apples, if you will, that without some sort of enforcement, strong arm enforcement, they unfortunately some people just don't comply, no matter how good your customer service skills and your education attempts are. So we do need to have strong ordinances along with some negative deterrent, as in fines. We're also working, our training officer is working with the sheriff's office and our legal counsel to get us a relationship with the district attorney's office, because the Harbors and Nav Code has specific regulation that makes violation of our ordinances a misdemeanor, actually a criminal offense. Our relationship and our bail schedule at present does not allow any court enforcement. So our violations are more administrative violations at present. So we're looking at that potential as well. There are, I think, some negative ramifications of that as well, making our our deputy harbor masters, there's consideration there that I want to make sure we're fully vetted before bringing something to the board. Our deputy harbor masters, I believe, and I know the board believes from individual discussions, our deputy harbor masters should be primarily safety. They save lives weekly, especially in poor weather, and then customer service is way up there. And when you become a police officer is unfortunately more of a enforcement. We want to be more of a safety, rescue, water safety, education, and customer service. That's what I know the board wants our direction to be. So how we go forward with with having participation in writing citations that ultimately could end up with somebody incarcerated is something that I know we're not going to take lightly. We want to make sure that we are thoroughly vetting such things before bringing it to the board for decision ultimately.
So
I
would just like to say that I looked up what it costs per night at the Pillar Point Harbor RV lot, and it's $84 a night to $67 a night. So that's what it costs there, and that includes the sewer connection. So to me, it seems like it's less than $25 more to get this fine, and So I think you guys lowballed it on that one, and I really wish it was higher. I'm just not comfortable with that, but I understand what you're saying. I do.
And I'm sorry though if I meant to say, or if I implied that these figures are firm. So if the board wants to change these figures, they can be changed just at the board direction right now. So if we wanna, I was just trying to explain how we arrived at them.
I understand.
But I'm not saying that they were fixed. The board can direct these numbers to be anywhere they wish to. Our staff, these are kind of, I guess, minimal to allow our staff to have some enforcement and ability to ensure that there are negative ramifications if you're violating our district ordinances. I gotta say, I talked with several staff members, and I said, let's make everything 200. That's minimal for turbo data. You know, the district already, even at 200, makes a very minimal amount of money. So it's not a matter of the district trying to generate revenue from citations. The fact is, we don't write a citation unless the individual is a flagrant, has already been warned. Customer service is first and paramount. So those that reach that threshold, as far as I was concerned, frankly, a $200 citation is what they get. But staff, I gotta say, care deeply for the relationships with everyone, and this is the numbers that we came up with, I'll say.
Okay, so I agree that they're low, but I also agree with your approach of incrementally looking at this. So, I mean, I'm very comfortable with this for now, knowing that y'all are gonna be looking at the ordinances and possibly even readjusting this later on. But I mean, like I said, 100% increase from the current fine to the proposed fine. I mean, this is not a moneymaker. So, and I don't think this is set in stone. So thank you for putting this together. I think it was good work.
When exactly would this potentially be going up? I mean, that's what I guess I'm not clear on. When would this be coming back to go? Like, because I'm just not comfortable with $100, knowing that we've got a sewage
Well, let me
problem. That
I understand
doesn't
completely.
feel good.
That's unacceptable, period. And that's a matter that we're taking very seriously, especially, in light that the K&N properties, we've been, as I know the board's aware, historically, when K&N properties took over the real RV park as our lessee, the district and the city of Half Moon Bay arguably weren't sure that a CDP was required. And a CDP has still not been obtained, but we've been formally noticed that a CDP is required. So we're working through that. Well, we cannot allow, for any length of time, the district to operate an RV park in another location without the CDP, without a CDP, and that would require significant improvements to the property. Again, I have just spoken with the enforcement agency at California Coastal Commission, who has requested information from me, and I'm going to provide that information, and I've already relayed that the district desires to immediately do what is required to be compliant. So I'm just saying that this fine may need to be, and this whole ordinance may need to be revised into an overnight parking policy that we would bring to the policy review board or standing committee before we fully implement that. But I anticipate that coming to a head very quickly.
Okay.
So we may end up,
But you see what I'm getting at, cause it's like, if people have a choice between paying $100 or paying $84, I would just much rather that they go somewhere where they can hook up to a sewer connection. And I feel like we need to incentivize people to go to the place with the sewer connection, not to the place without the sewer connection. So that's, I hear what you're saying, that this is, it sounds like it is coming back soon. I would just be a lot more
Well,
comfortable.
so there's a couple issues here. One is the fee is what would discourage. It's not the.
Well, I agree,
not the
that's the
fine.
problem too, but we're only being asked to look at the fine tonight. We're not being asked to look at the fee.
Right. So,
The rates and fees.
Rates,
it
rates and
sounds like-
fees aren't on our agenda.
These three of these are part of the rates and fees schedule, and that is looked at annually, so I don't know if Julie has plans to bring that up before the next budget cycle or not, but it might be coming up soon.
but in good conscience and knowing what we know now, and after my discussion with the California Coastal Commission enforcement agent, we really shouldn't be looking at
exactly.
a fee to encourage
That's right.
RVs in that lot at all. Because I
That's where I
believe
was
we're gonna
going.
be, it's likely, and I wanna inform the board more intelligently later. I don't know yet how this is going to play out, whether we're gonna have an option to continue having RVs there, and then the board could consider increasing fees, whether it's, the overnight fee or violation fees. But it may be that I have to come back to the board with something about immediately requiring the RVs out of there until we can better make a decision on how we want to go forward.
Okay.
Obviously the district's not going to remain or be in defiance of a California Coastal Commission compliance order.
Right, right.
So,
Okay,
I think that's right.
all right, I'm glad that it's all gonna come up soon, so, it's great.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second.
I think we're done discussing, right?
Yep.
Okay, great.
You heard the vote? Commissioner Mathush,
Aye.
President Brennan,
Aye.
Commissioner Byron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chankrali,
Aye.
Commissioner Moreno.
Aye.
Okay, so now we have, item 12, which is nomination of Special District Risk Management Authority, SDRMA, Board of Directors election, adopt resolution number 1905.
and that's only if the board chooses to actually make a recommendation. So this staff report is regarding the ability of the board of Harbor Commissioners to nominate a commissioner or a district management staff to the Special District Risk Management Authority Board of Directors for the 2023 term, if so desired. The Harbor District is a member of the SDRMA, both locally and statewide. This organization provides legislative support and lobbying in Sacramento, as well as valuable training and education opportunities. The SDRMA Board of Directors consists of 7 board members who are elected at large from members participating in the SDRMA program. The SDRMA Board of Directors is the governing body responsible for policy decisions related to member services. Board member responsibilities include a commitment to standards and ethics, commitment to the time and energy to be effective, represent and make policy decisions for the benefit and in the best interest of all SDRMA members. The commitment would require the board member to attend all board meetings, an average of 8 board meetings per year held at the SDRMA office in Sacramento. Typically, the first Wednesday and Thursday of the month from 1 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. So as you can, it's, they say it's roughly 20 to 30 hours of a commitment.
How about 15 to 20?
Yeah, that's what I saw in here too.
Yeah, I'm sorry, 15 to 20 hours. I was just doing the math real quick of what
Sounds more like.
they said that, yeah, what they said
Sounds like
that,
a part-time job.
the hours. So it's a significant commitment to, for one of the, for a small district to, in this, you know, removed location from Sacramento. You know, to become an actual board member. So at this time, if the board wishes to nominate someone to be on the SDRMA Board of Directors, they can do so. If not, there's no action that needs to be taken.
Does anyone want to make a nomination?
No.
No? Okay. All right, so.
I wonder if there's the ability at CSDA to find someone in a larger district who's participating and get feedback from them occasionally. I can look into that.
Okay.
Well, we could have, you know, an agenda item once a year or once every quarter or whatever to update the board on what has been happening in their meetings. If somebody wanted to take on tracking that, fancy,
Yeah.
if you're interested.
Yep, yep, I'm happy
You
to
could
do that.
give us a little report on, and maybe that would fit with, because you're gonna be able to report to us
Mhm.
on CSDA, since you're
Yeah.
now
Mhm.
the vice president of the local chapter. So that might be great to wrap that all together. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, good,
Great.
Okay.
good idea.
And then maybe you can get the local chapter to get a regular update on SDMRA too. I
Yeah.
don't think it's an acronym like that, you know. Okay, cool. So we're moving on. Glad somebody's doing it. We don't know who.
Right.
So we're gonna go back to item 5, because that was the one we skipped earlier. And that was pulled off consent, and that the subject is executive search services for general manager. And this is Julie's item.
Okay, on January 4th of this year, the district invited qualified firms and individuals to submit a proposal by January 28th and to outline the experience in executive search services. The district requested the following scope of services: development of recruitment materials for the general manager position, including refinement of the candidate profile for the position, outreach on a nationwide basis to the public and private sector for qualified candidates, background investigation and preliminary screening of applicants based upon the criteria, and periodic meetings and progress reports to the ad hoc search committee and full board of harbor commissioners, and assistance to the ad hoc search committee and commission as required during the interview and evaluation process. 3 interested parties responded to the RFP, including William Avery and Associates, CPS HR Consulting, and Koff and Associates. The ad hoc search committee, consisting of board president Sabrina Brennan and board vice president Ed Laveranis, reviewed the 3 proposals and interviewed the top 2 proposers, which was CPS HR Consulting and Koff and Associates. And then after careful comparison, it was determined that CPS HR Consulting submitted the most comprehensive and detailed proposal, and that the additional cost of the proposed services was warranted. There were items like, you know, they spelled out exactly where they were going to advertise, and that included postings at Port and Harbor Masters, bulletin boards, and, you know, what their search was going to be, and they were very much more responsive to additional requests for information. And so the staff is recommending that the board authorize the interim general manager to execute a PSA with CPS HR Consulting with the cost not to exceed $31,800 and authorize a 10% contingency upon approval of the interim general manager.
Okay.
And just to follow up, we did ask for staff's input on the selection, because both Commissioner Lorenz and I were sort of torn between the top two choices. So it was really helpful to hear from staff on their experience as to who was more responsive. We kind of sensed it, but we weren't sure, so we were thankful to get some help from staff in making the decision.
Yeah, I mean, that was really the reason I pulled it off, was just to get a sense of, you know, you say in the staff report, careful comparison, and so I was just wondering what the criteria were that were used to make this decision. And I'm not questioning the decision, it's just, there wasn't anything in here, and the other, and I don't wanna waste paper, you know, the other two RFPs were not in here, so I just wanted to get a sense of how, was there a metrics, was there
Julie,
anything that was quantitatively done to select them? And I mean, I'm fine with it, I just wanted to
Julie-
hear this.
Julie put she discussed with me as well, so I had a little bit of input.
Yeah,
But Julie did quite an extensive comparative analysis.
okay,
But because one might interpret that comparative analysis, the firms that were not chosen, that were all good qualified firms,
yeah,
that comparative analysis though could be potentially interpreted in some areas of it, where one won over another, as a negative. So we just didn't want to, you know, it's obviously all public record should someone do a PRA request, but we just didn't see it necessary to to put it in the packet as something
are they
that
on our website so that the public can access this?
we could do so.
I think it would be useful, not that it's like this hugely important thing, but, you know, if someone's reading this and like, oh, well, they're gonna spend this, which is fine, it's just, you know, this was literally, which is, you know, one-page staff report.
Well, I think
that
if
said-
we're,
Can I just finish?
Yeah,
The
go ahead.
careful comparison, I was just wondering what the comparison was, that's all. So I appreciate
It's
the work that y'all have done.
that was kind of my decision.
Yeah,
It
that's
wasn't my
fine.
fault.
I'm not blaming you,
I just from my life experience, the you know, comparative analysis that staff use to you know, to compare one firm with another is sometimes can be interpreted, parts of it, as a firm being deficient and almost insulting, which is not the intent and not even the reality. I'm just saying that it's just some people could read into something as and interpret it as a negative, where
Yeah.
it's just, they're just different. Some are better in some other areas than others. The fact is that I think everyone that would read our comparative analysis would agree that it was fair and unbiased and well done, professionally done, and our decision we arrived at was logical. For this particular instance, working for our district, we chose this firm, not to say that those other firms aren't great firms as well, but just in this particular
Right.
instance, we,
I get it.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to authorize the interim GM to execute a professional services agreement to CPAS HR Consulting for a fixed fee of $23,800 plus reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses estimated at $8,000 for a total of $31,800 with an additional 10% contingency on approval by the interim GM.
and I'll second that, and I have a couple comments. So, I personally would prefer that we not have staff analysis of, you know, it could be, we're considering hiring somebody, we don't wanna talk about. Yeah, I don't think we should make that public if we don't have to. If we have to, then we have to. That's, I guess, a question for Bill, but I think if there's an interest in seeing all three of the proposals, that we could just link them on our website, because I don't
That's
think,
what I mean.
yeah, I think
don't
that's
need to put
fine.
the whole thing on
I
there.
think if we just put the
We'll
proposals,
get that done right away.
Yeah,
Okay. I think that,
I'm fine with that.
and that way everybody can see
Can
what we.
see it, because
and-
they're not in here.
And they were all good, they were all good proposals, so it was a tough decision to make, and it's good to have
Okay.
a lot of great choices.
So there's a motion and a second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none,
No.
roll call.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Ryrie?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Mathush?
Aye.
President Brennan?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so, are we at the end? So the next regular meeting will be held on April 17th, 2019, at this office in El Granada. And would someone like to move to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Mathush?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
President Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Ryrie?
Aye.